This episode features a podcast developed by NASAA's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, I2 Impact, Building Capacity for Marginalized Wealth. It highlights a discussion between Canadian EDI consultant Theaston White and Canadian regulator Alicia Love. Welcome to NASAA Talks. I am Oralia Cooper, member of the NASAA's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. NASAA's board-level Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion DEI Committee was created in 2020. The committee includes member representatives from various jurisdictions. In the fall of 2021, NASAA member approved a DEI statement outlining NASAA's commitment to welcome and accept all people to forge a community that fosters integration, inclusion, respect, and treats everyone fairly. Today, you will hear a conversation between Alicia Love, Senior Legal Counsel with the Financial and Consumer Services Commission of New Brunswick, and Theaston White, Canadian Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion EDI consultant. Thank you for being with us today, Alicia, and hosting our I2 Invest Building Capacity for Marginalized Wealth podcast, where you interview Theaston White from Theaston White Consulting, leading EDIA, HR, and change management expert.
Hi, thank you, Oralia. I'm really happy to be here today, and I'm excited to share the conversation that I had with Theaston.
But before we dive into our discussion, let me provide our audience with a brief background about you. Alicia has dedicated over 18 years to practicing commercial law, with the last 7 years spent at the Commission. In this role, she offers legal support to the leadership team and staff, serves as the secretary to the Audit and Risk Management Committee of the Boards of Directors, contributes to the Commission's Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion strategy, and has recently taken on the responsibility of coordinating the internal audit process.
Yes, I wear many hats at the Commission, but one what I'm most proud of is my involvement with the IDEA strategy at the Commission. I've been involved with NASAA since 2018, and I've been with the NASAA DEI Committee since 2022. Some of the areas I addressed with Theaston include our conversation regarding the importance of authentic leadership. And I think others will especially be interested in hearing the importance of having those vulnerable conversations. Today, you'll hear from the perspective of a Black man who is a member of the LGBTQ community. He shares his personal experiences and challenges on navigating financial services, as well as his own insight as a DEI consultant on how industry and regulators can improve their journey to affect positive change in these areas.
Yes, if listeners can walk away today with what I call nuggets of information of his involvement within the community, and give us ways on how to better enhance our working environment, how to better enhance our services to our constituents, our audience. This will be definitely time well spent. So let's get into it. Here is the conversation between Alicia and Theaston.
Hi, Theaston. I'm so happy to speak with you today, and thank you for joining us on our initial podcast for the I Invest 2 with NASAA's DEI Committee. Before we begin today, I was wondering if you could just introduce yourself to our listeners, let us know your perspective of where you're coming from and your experience leading up to becoming a consultant in the DEI sector.
Thanks so much, Alicia, for having me. It's lovely to be here today. Look, I am from the East Coast in Canada. African-Canadian descent. And actually, on the East Coast, we have the largest African-Canadian population in all of Canada. And I'm also a gay Black male, which can be stifling at times, given that there's not many guys that are African-Canadian and Black and gay. It's a privilege to be here, and also an honor to be able to feed into the work that you're doing with your organization.
What brought you into the EDI space as a consultant? Where did that journey begin for you?
During my childhood, I became very intuitive to who I was as a gay male. So knowing who I was sexually at the age of 5 allowed me to understand some of the structure of our society. As I mentioned, I grew up on the East Coast in Canada, and at the age of 17, I joined a policing program with the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, which is our federal police force in Canada. And it was a program that was designed to increase capacity for members of color, so RCMP officers in particular, and to pilot a community-based policing model, which was designed to engage community, that particularly of the African Canadian population. When you look at my inception into the EDI space, it really was at the age of 17 when I joined this program that really allowed me to see community in a sense that I wouldn't have otherwise seen coming from a policing background. So while I was training to be an RCMP officer, as the cadet program is geared to equip individuals to join the RCMP as a regular member, I was able to see the various distinctions between my community, the African Canadian community, and the general society. It allowed me to see some of the challenges that existed and to really identify with my own culture, to understand my identity as a Black man. And at that time, because I wasn't out, certainly I knew that I was gay. So I also had the ability to look at things from a very different perspective, from someone who was Black and gay, not out, but also understood the socioeconomic and the social challenges that existed, and the divide really when you look at African Canadians and as it relates to myself. It really shaped the way that I view things from a larger perspective.
So, when it comes to equity, diversity, and inclusion, you have a really interesting lens to share. I was wondering if you could share a little bit about that experience with us.
So when we look at um, individuals who are disenfranchised as a result of characteristics that embody that or part of who they are, it sets a whole tone and trajectory for the wealth and the mental health, the health of an individual. I say that to say I rejected my sexuality myself, and hence I ended up married, I had children. And not only that, but it gave me a motive to beat everything that society had said that I couldn't have because of who I was. So if I look at it from, a financial component, look, I was 19 thereabouts when I had my first child. I started raising my family. By the time I was 23, I had 3 children, a wife, and a house. It was very advantageous of me, and I was determined to have the best. I think my first house cost me thereabouts of $300,000 in the upper class Bedford South neighborhood, which is a pretty big accomplishment for somebody of my age, my color, my sexual orientation, all of these things, some of which was hidden. But I did it because I wanted people to see that I could supersede the expectation and the expectations that were placed on me.
Jen, we've spoken before previous to this podcast. And during some of our initial conversations and getting to know each other, you shared with me a story of an experience you had when accessing services through a financial institution. I was wondering if you would be willing to share that story with us today.
Sure. I was visiting a West Coast in Canada, and upon went to my bank to open up a bank account, just an everyday banking account. And at that time, there was a lot of skepticism. It seemed the feeling was just off. And as someone of color, I'm very in tune when social cues and different perspectives or different views or feelings are in the air. I'm really in tune to that. And so upon visiting this branch in particular, I was questioned in terms of what the need was for the bank account. I was asked to produce identification, government issued IDs, I think in excess of 7, maybe different IDs, from health cards to bank cards to driver's license to SIN numbers to birth certificates. I'm the type of guy, I keep everything on me. And so luckily I had enough identification to produce, but still was in excess and still wasn't enough, up to including a bank, not a bank, sorry, excuse me, up to including a lease agreement for my condo back in Halifax. So it was very strange and very odd. The bank manager was involved from the get-go, which is very not typical to open up and you can do this online. So it gave me a very uneasy feeling. I knew that there were other factors at play. And as a person of color, as I said, I'm very intuitive when different treatment is being at play. I as I said, I was able to produce all of the information, all the material on the spot. But still there was a need for further, I don't know, risk assessment on their end. I don't know. They never ever opened the bank account. And it wasn't until I spoke to the executive leadership team to convey my concerns and the challenge that existed. I have to say that upon the leadership team, they were able to rectify the situation and rectify the challenges, very willing to address the issue, but also the idea that this was present within an organization led to other key initiatives like inclusive client interactions and other programs.
That's really interesting because what I would like to hear from you are some suggestions you may have for us as regulators. We as regulators reach out to industry to work with and collaborate and give some best practices and ideas too, and also to the general public so that they are aware of their access to services and financial literacy. I was wondering if you could share with us some thoughts on how we can reach out to marginalized communities and how to better ourselves in the way we deliver our services or educate those who do.
Good question. It's something that exists within our current systems relative to communities that have traditionally been marginalized. I guess my point is that if we knew that the problem existed from the beginning, then why haven't we corrected these challenges that exist within our systems in our banking and financial institutions? I think it's very key to note that when addressing these types of issues, that one, you understand what the issues are and the challenges, and two, that you have somebody that is able to lead an organization financially or otherwise through a process to understand what the challenges are and how to correct those challenges. The opportunities could look like anything. It could be a bank program that you have, a loan program where disproportionately Black members of financial institutions are being rejected for loans as opposed to the white population. I would suspect that within data, you should be able to determine that some of this material to give you indications as to if there are challenges. It goes without saying that communities have been marginalized within our social structure, and therefore there's a need to look at very specific targeted initiatives, programs, bank loans that will allow communities to build capacity, to build generational wealth, to start small businesses. The list goes on and on. It's about leveling the playing field, as we may say, being able to identify that, first of all, there is a challenge and there is a problem within our social structure. Is once you come to that fundamental understanding, then you can see where organizations, banks as well, need to embrace some significant change that will allow for some equity within within the banking products and services and client service delivery models. The list goes on. As indicated in previous, I think we spoke about various programs that are geared towards new immigrants to various countries, whether it be Canada or the United States.
When we look at the idea of generational wealth or access to wealth or inaccessibility to wealth and the youth options to enter into wealth building currently, do you have any suggestions on how to reach out to youth in particularly in an authentic way to kickstart that conversation?
Great question. Look, I'm a huge proponent of engaging youth on all levels, publicly and financially, wherever we can engage our youth. They are our tomorrow, and they bring vision and they bring a perspective that sometimes we don't see or sometimes we miss. I would say within marginalized communities as a whole, any type of initiatives that are geared towards equipping our youth with the ideologies and the understandings of what it takes to build businesses, to empower them, to drive their visions and to make them realize their dreams and their goals. When it comes to business and economic growth, our youth are very powerful. They have so many ideas, technology, the list goes on and on. I sat in a conference for Black fathers to give education and understanding and to promote entrepreneurship and how to pass that on to your children. It was impressive to hear in some respect. There were some participants, some dads were saying how their 5-year-old children, they're teaching how to start businesses. And that's encouraging because those lessons will help curb some of the challenges, some of the indifferences, the imbalances that we face in our social structure. So I think that we, in a general sense, I think that we don't do enough of that in a very broad sense. But when you look at segregated sections of society, that idea or that notion that could be them or that they could have a business and be the CEO of a business or own a bank, that notion is very seldom when it comes to people of color or different communities that have been marginalized traditionally. So I think that in any scale to engage youth, in particular with a focus on youth from marginalized communities, is a great venture and one that is meaningful and very powerful for empowering our youth to realize that they can attain anything and everything, because it takes one person to believe in our youth. And sometimes parents from marginalized communities may not have the capacity to even encourage their children for many reasons, whether it be fear that they fail or what have you. I think that if we can pick up some of these pieces, it's a well invested interest.
Yes, it makes me think about something I heard recently when speaking with a leader in a community economic development type corporation, who instead of using the word marginalized communities has shifted the conversation to communities of opportunity, which don't leave, open yourself up to the vast array of options that are out there and don't close off, but be open to the opportunities that are there and share. So it's an interesting shift that we're seeing in even the verbiage being used by certain groups to continue that outreach.
Sure, absolutely. It's a great point that you bring up because the words that we speak have meaning and they have power. And when you say something, you bring it alive by virtue of a word. And oftentimes in the work that I do, I like to drive away from the negative stigma that can be attached very easily. And areas of opportunity is a great example. To see something as an opportunity, whether it be a fault or an opportunity, it's an opportunity. And that's the focus. And I think that's what will drive the success of any type of initiative that comes with negative undertones.
So, Theaston, our listeners have heard from what perspective you're coming from. for the benefit of understanding the questioning and the way I'm approaching this, just for our listeners to know, I am a white female heterosexual from East Coast Canada. So I come to my work and my experiences differently. I have a different lived experience, which includes a vast array, I'm sure, of unconscious bias that I'm continuing to learn and grow so that I can become better at the work and the relationships that I'm building and doing. As regulators reaching out across North America, beyond collecting the information and data, doing those tests, seeing what our biases are, what else do you see us being able to do to continue our growth and journey in equity, diversity, and inclusion in the work that we do daily? Do you have one tip that can take us through this journey to keep in mind?
Can appreciate, and I'm humbled that you are able to acknowledge your privilege. And I think that it takes a conversation in a white woman of white privilege to understand where she sits in the whole scheme of things says a lot. It's very powerful. It's very disarming. And it sets the stage to have an authentic and a real conversation, a conversation about what that privilege looks like and what challenges exist as a result of that privilege. I think that to answer your question, it really starts with a conversation. And it's a conversation that so many people are, I would say, challenged in fear because it really takes a lot of vulnerability to disarm yourself in an authentic way, to begin a conversation, to embark on what this looks like and how we can make a difference. It's very easy in the line of work that I do with various organizations to see where there's a vested interest and there's an authentic interest. There are two different things. A vested interest could mean so many things, up to and including checking off boxes, because it makes good sense for the business at the end of the day. When somebody is authentically invested, it's all they see and they just want to make things right. And as an EDI practitioner, it's very easy for me to be able to capture the authenticity of the organizations and individuals who embark on making a difference when it comes to the inequities that exist within our society. So I would really say that a conversation and whatever that looks like, organizations, it starts at the top. So if we have a CEO that's uncomfortable with a conversation, then in terms of leadership, I would argue that it would be an area of an organization that would be very weak as a result of somebody who attains who is in a leadership position is not able to confront the issues themselves. So if there's no value and there's no value seen in EDI, then I would anticipate that would be something that you would see within the operations of an organization. It's very telling.
Recently in the news, we've seen reports coming out of the United States concerning some lending practices and allegations of potential discrimination with respect to access to mortgages through a federally regulated credit union. With that, it was showing that there was a large disparity between approved loans for white borrowers versus Black and Latino. I was wondering what your perspective is on that, and considering us as regulators who some of us across North America do work with financial institutions, what we should be looking to or what we could take away from these reports.
Did read the article that spoke of the disparities quite recently with the financial institution that you mentioned. And I think for me, I'm not surprised. I am surprised in the sense that in today's world, in today's society, and after everything that we know, that these challenges still exist. But at the same time, it goes back to my earlier statement around leadership. It goes without saying that within our leadership, our executive leadership, if we're not equipped, if we don't have the capacity, if we're unwilling to have the conversations, these are the outputs. These are direct correlation to the challenges that exist when we look at segments of society indifferent. That's why it's so important to incorporate various practices, training, and education around inequities, unconscious bias, understanding who our clients are, regardless of the color of our clients. They are our clients, and they make up the bottom dollar when it comes to financial institutions. Their money is just as good. So how is it that they are being disenfranchised from mainstream society when it comes to bank loans and mortgages? It just doesn't make sense. At the end of the day, it comes back to an organization, mainly within our leadership team. There's something that's disconnected. And I put this on leadership because it's our leadership that drives our organizations and the values of our organizations and the importance and the significance of various values. So if you're an organization and you're a CEO that values diversity, that values integrity, that values corporate citizenship, that values all of these fundamental pieces that engage community as a whole, then I dare say that some of these challenges, we look at bank loans and mortgages and the disparities among marginalized communities, would be our end of the day output. Because let's face it, if you've been around for the George Floyd era, when everybody started jumping on the bandwagon to correct some of these inequities and some of these structural challenges, it's very concerning that still today that we're hearing that these are some of the challenges that exist. It's not a surprise because some people are just not willing to authentically step into the space to correct the challenges. But I think that with organizations and with projects and initiatives such as yours, I think it helps to address some of these challenges.
Through your consulting experience, are there any strategies or advice that you could give us? And maybe share with us some of your own personal experiences on the East Coast of Canada as a gay man and what your experiences have been in accessing wealth or barriers or obstacles that you have seen. Is realizing that everyone's situation is different and you're not speaking for an entire community, but to share with us yours.
I had to be very strategic in the way that I did some of this. Anytime that I went to rent property or anytime that I went to go for a mortgage, I would go to a mortgage broker, as an example, because a broker is going to be able to field hundreds, not thousands of financial institutions that wouldn't place a picture on me, as opposed to sitting in front of a bank manager who's looking at my color and easily able to influence my application. Or real estate agent I would use to rent the property. These are strategies that I used to achieve things that I wanted in life that I saw that other segments of society could attain very easily. Had this conversation with a colleague who was a white woman and shared, look, when I was in my early 20s, my parents encouraged me to go to the bank to get a mortgage. She didn't even have a job and was coached through this application process, which just goes to show that as individuals and as a client, as we deliver products, we deliver programs in the financial sector, all of these financial products that are not even available to some segments of society, it comes very easily to others. So for me, I think that working with institutions around understanding bias and understanding the impact of bias, understanding how to eliminate those bias through banking processes and programs, delivery of various programs. In some cases, we are in a position where we need to build capacity because we know that we're working in a social structure where systems are imbalanced. How do we correct those indifferences? Look, my community is at hardship more than yours. It's not about that. It's about understanding that this is equal. We're looking for an equal playing field. We want to promote and provide the same quality service to all of our clients. Look, it's been my life work relative to EDI. I'm very passionate about the ways that we can really increase capacity to build stronger communities that are inclusive and all engaging. Martin Luther King, he said, hate can't drive out hate, only love can do that. So the work that I do in my consultancy today is all about love. And whether it be through policy, whether it be through policy development, curriculum development, training, organizational coaching, you name it, there is the ideology that at the end of the day, like Martin Luther King said, only love can make the difference. And so my philosophy and the work that I do with organizations through my consultancy is all about creating a balance that creates harmony, essentially, within organizations. So it could be policy development, could be coaching, even at a CEO level.
Could you share with us what it is you do now as a consultant and the type of industries that you work with? There's a variety there, and I understand you do speaking engagements and have received rewards and recognitions. And could you share a little bit of that with us as well?
Well, I've covered off all jurisdictions of government, working in the provincial government, Public Service Commission of Nova Scotia, as well as the federal government, Fisheries and Oceans Canada, and lastly, working with the municipal government with the elections, and all of which lent very unique experiences for me. It's allowed me to expand the work that I've done within the EDI sector and understand social structures a lot better, which enhances the work that I do, which helps the organizations that I work with.
So, Theaston, when dealing with the ideas of disproportionate gaps and generational wealth, how would you recommend that the financial industry begin to assess and measure where the impact could lie? Where do we begin?
Alicia, when you have a leak in the roof, the logical thing to do is to fix the leak so you don't get wet. We know our bias can hinder the work we do. How do we make things better in the delivery of service, the financial sector? I guess my question would be, as regulators, have you ever embarked on methods such as gathering information, data, to see what, if any, opportunities exist? And we're talking about generational wealth. We want to ensure that our client base is being reflected within our community, or that our community is reflected within our market that we serve. If you have poor numbers, or numbers that are low and not indicative of our community at large, then that might signal that there's a problem. So fix the leak so you don't get wet. If we think of inclusivity and we think about our clients, we think about demographic, the people that we serve. Inclusive client interactions is all about being inclusive. So it's all about understanding our bias and who we are. We want to treat individuals as individuals. We don't want to take away who they are. We want to treat them very specifically. But at the same time, we want to ensure that through our interactions that we're creating and nurturing growth, and that we're nurturing the best service delivery model that we can possibly offer. As we look at the way that we treat people, that, that we're not treating John different than we're treating Sarah. And this all comes back to the way that we envision, the way that we see, the way that we view and value the clients that we have. The way that we interact with our clients very much should be very inclusive.
Okay. You're definitely giving us a lot to think about, especially as regulators, both as how we operate internally. And you spoke about how do we assess ourselves by seeing what's our employee makeup and what do we look like internally, like fix the roof before you go, or we often say leading from the top, or these catchphrases we're hearing about how we make it integral to who we are before we reach out to the communities that we're trying to work with. It's very important to look at ourselves before going outwards.
I think biggest challenge that is faced when looking at the work surrounding EDI is to do it in a way that is with intention. And it causes one to be in a place of vulnerability. Not everybody knows how to address challenges, and let's face it, people don't like dealing with challenging situation or areas of opportunity, as I like to call it, that evoke emotion and strong feelings. There comes vulnerability. To have that dialogue and to have those conversations take courage. Leaders are the ones that lead the way by embarking on these conversations. It um, may cause leaders to dig into their organizations to ask these tough questions. So how, as regulators, how can you impact that change? How can you set the stage to turn the tide in these areas? I think is by leading the way, whether it be by embarking on various programs that are designed specific that fall under your helm to start the conversation. That's the biggest piece. So oftentimes in the work that I do, it's all about communication. It's all about understanding people and all about seeing what opportunities exist rather than, who's to point the finger at. My advice, especially to regulator, would be to ensure that you're setting the stage, that you're creating the opportunities for these conversations to exist, which you're doing today. And I commend you for that, because without these conversations, then the institutions aren't thinking about how is the work that we're doing and who is impacted. Are there areas that we can make better? Are there areas that we can do better in? What does our product delivery look like? What segments of our society are not falling within our market, but fall with our social demographic? These are questions that I think are very important and questions that should definitely be asked. I think that it takes a certain level. In fact, I would say that it takes honesty and intention, first and primarily, uh, the ability to gauge and measure what your institutions under your jurisdiction is or is not doing in a way that can coach and develop and incubate, if you will, positive change. I think that we will have a better social structure or economic setting. I believe we will have a better educated society. All of these things, which is a tall, but I think very doable. It just takes that level of vulnerability to step into and ask those questions and to develop the opportunities for this to exist.
It really comes back to what you started with in the beginning. When you're speaking about Martin Luther King Jr. and how one of your first interactions in the consulting area was with an industry that wronged you in a way, and that you could go in angry or you could go in another way. And like you said, through love, in the words of Martin Luther King, hatred cannot drive out hatred. Only love can do that. And it seems that you approach your work in the same way as that quote guides us, especially in the EDI space. I think those are very powerful words.
Thank you.
You operate your own consulting business in this space. And I was wondering if you could share with our listeners more about the services you could offer and how they may go about using yourself or someone like you to help them through their EDI journeys and develop their own internal practices and procedures.
Starts with a conversation. Every organization is in a different place. In terms of the services that I provide, it starts with understanding an organization, understanding what their needs are. In terms of services, I provide executive coaching around the EDI space, as well as strategic planning. So planning organizational strategies around EDI, keynote talks, really anything and everything, policy development. It really depends on the organization and what the organization's needs are. from training to really creating and developing programs and initiatives that are addressing some of the challenges that exist, the areas of opportunities that organizations are looking to make good on in terms of serving their clients. And I think that's why it's, as an EDI practitioner, it's so much more meaningful to invest in organizations with my time who have a sense of authenticity when it comes to addressing the challenges within the EDI space. Really, it takes a bit of vulnerability to have that conversation. And I'm the type of guy that would sit down and say, what does your organization look like? What are some of the challenges that you have? Where do you want to see your organization? Where do you want to see them go? And it's a very authentic conversation to understand what those needs are and strategizing around how we can make the difference and make inroads when it comes to what EDI looks like within organizations.
Yes. I think these conversations are something that are difficult for some, depending on where they're coming from and what privilege they have. It's scary. It's vulnerable. And I think extremely important. And I thank you so much for sharing with us today your thoughts and your teachings to us, because we're learning all through this. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wow, that was an amazing conversation, Alicia. I especially enjoyed listening to Theaston speak about how leadership impacts the organization, how it is just so imperative for the leadership to really buy into DEI and their initiatives.
Yes, one of my favorite parts of our conversation was when we spoke about leading from the top, how it's important to have our leadership teams, whether it's the CEO or board of directors, really lead the change when it comes to DEI. As regulators and as the organizations with our own employees, if we don't have that authentic leadership, then the journey itself won't go as far as we hope. And in order to bring great change in this area, the idea of having our leaders truly pass on the importance of these conversations and change is where the strength lies. And Theaston really highlighted that for us.
I agree, absolutely, in regards to leadership. Very important. Alicia, are there any other key areas you'd like to highlight?
Another key area was his discussion on inclusive client interactions, which it really builds on that concept of understanding the communities you work with to address how you deliver services and regulate your areas. Making sure that we're open to recognizing our unconscious biases to truly be able to address different experiences with the clients and stakeholders we work with.
The unconscious biases that you both mentioned is, I think, so important. I found myself as I listened to it, thinking about my own. And it was tough, realizing that everyone has it. So it didn't make me feel bad about myself, but it made me feel that, wow, I do have them and I need to find ways to correct them. So I really appreciate that. And I'm grateful you both did mention it. And personally, I also identified the areas where he spoke about marginalized communities needing more opportunities in the areas of finance. That was an important area to highlight. Absolutely.
Yes, and when he highlighted the things beyond data collecting, right? There's so much on the looking at metrics and performance and what are the KPIs when it comes to DEI, but then going beyond that to truly acknowledge our privilege and those unconscious biases and to really face the challenges and understand and have those conversations with the groups that we're reaching out with and working with to understand their existence and experiences and acknowledge where we can make valuable change. Meet those challenges and overcome them is really the key takeaway for me in today's conversation.
And on behalf of NASAA, thank you, Alicia and Theaston, for the insightful and informative conversation. And for more information about Theaston White and several resources, go to NASAA DEI website.